Hello, today I'm going to show you how to use Chrome Developer Tools to understand an example at an architectural level. So first we're going to look at this example, and as you can see how we have a toggle A here, toggle B button here, and a third button here, and what we're going to look at this simple website, we're going to look at the simple website and we're going to try to determine how this happens. So notice when you click Ajax JSON a ship gets appended, a spaceship gets appended to the page. And so this is going to be a guide for how that works. And so the way we're going to do that is we're first going to open up Chrome Developer Tools. So you can do Command Option J on a Mac and open Chrome Developer Tools. And the first thing I'm going to show you is the DOM inspection affordance. So what you can do in Chrome Developer Tools is actually look at the page itself and all the elements in the DOM of the page, and you can see as you scroll over these elements what part of the page gets highlighted. And so for this Ajax button here, you can see that that's under this element, and there's the button right there. And for these ships, you can see that they're right here in this div right here. Next, I'm going to show you the file tree affordance. So you may be wondering what files of JavaScript code actually trigger this type of activity. So you can see style sheets. Let's ignore that. Images, ignore that. Demo, ignore that because that's HTML. Let's focus on the JavaScript. Within JavaScript, Zepto looks like a library. So let's look at home. You can see here that it looks kind of like a library code. So home. So let's go ahead and look at home. And so now within home you have this clean file, and you can read this file to understand what's going on. But now I'm going to tell you about a strategy to go through. What I would recommend is you should really decide which files are important, as we just showed, determining that home.js is important, for example, or Zepto is a library, so you could ignore it. And next I'm going to show you how to set breakpoints. So we think you should set breakpoints at the callback of immediate callbacks of events or asynchronous calls. So over here we can see that there are several asynchronous calls. Since we're investigating specifically this interaction between Ajax JSON A and these ships, we can set, and well, we can go back to the elements here and see that if we do this and press inspect there, it'll highlight over test 4. So this Ajax JSON A button was actually from this element with ID test 4. So when the element with ID test 4 is clicked, that's when Ajax JSON A, that's when this callback function gets called. That's when Ajax JSON A's button gets clicked. So you can see the JSON getter function is right here. So the immediate callback of the click on ID test 4 is the JSON getter function. And so we can put a breakpoint inside the first line of the immediate callback of the click on ID test 4, which is the button Ajax JSON A. Now, if you didn't know it was the callback of test 4, you could have put breakpoints in the callback of all the different click activity, and the breakpoint would only get stopped at this one. Now, where else should you set breakpoints? You should set breakpoints if a function looks important to the UI. Well, you know what? This looks here when it says append. That looks kind of important because it's appending stuff to the UI. So let me put a breakpoint there. And you could search strings that you think might be important and put breakpoints there as well. Another thing is that it's not just events that have callbacks, but also Ajax requests have callbacks because they're making a request to a server that's returning data. And if we scroll here and let's maybe expand this out a little bit, you can see that, let's expand this a little bigger even. You can see that the callback to this Ajax request is called JSON response handler. And so let's put a breakpoint at the first line of the Ajax response handler. And so that's all the breakpoints that we're going to set. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to replay the code and watch. So generally what we'd recommend to do is refresh the page, and then, okay, our breakpoints are still there. And now let's go ahead and do the interaction. And so let's see, click. Oh, it stopped here. So the first thing, so you did test for click, and then this JSON getter function got called, and the first line of the JSON getter function is this line, and immediately we see the breakpoint we hit a breakpoint. So then what can we do now? Well, let's move this back this way a little bit so we can see that. Now, what we can do is we can understand, oh, so test for click happened, and then this callback JSON getter function occurred, and now we're in there. So let's see what happens next. So next, this first line itself is making an AJAX request to get data from a server. So let's press play. Oh, and so now we enter into the JSON response handler, which we remember was the callback of the AJAX request over here. So right here, we're in the first line of the JSON response handler, and we know that this line executes, which seems to be creating some variable that stores some HTML. And then one thing that's kind of cool that I'll explain to you is that you don't have to, you can press this play button to go to the next breakpoint or just finish the code if there's no more breakpoints left. But you could also step through line by line. So if you press this button, you'll literally step through line by line to the next line of code. So it goes here, and then you can step through again and it'll go to the bottom. But sometimes if you step through, it'll go to, if you step through again, it'll go to some library code, in which case you might want to resume the script as execution to get to the next breakpoint. So let's go resume that. And then that basically completed all the actions that we had. So let's redo this now. So let's press it again. We see we stop at the first line of the first callback function of the click action, and this first line is making an AJAX request. Then we press resume, and then we get to a point where there's an HTML element being created, and then we press resume again, and then that HTML element is appended to the page, and then So this is the second callback. The first callback was the JSON getter function. The second callback is the JSON response handler. And then if we press resume again, we're done. Now, let's see here. What we'd recommend you do at this stage is actually try to diagram out your understanding. And this is an example of a diagram I did. So first you click on the button, and then that asynchronously calls a function, and that function makes, and that function's name is JSON getter function, and that function makes an AJAX call, and then so inside of that function, that AJAX call happens. Now that AJAX call asynchronously calls a callback function called JSON response handler, and that JSON response handler is this node right here, and that's basically appending the ship to the page, appending the HTML of the shipped image to the page. And so we'd highly recommend that you make diagrams like this. And there's instructions on how to do such diagramming and note taking in the instructions document, but that's what we recommend. Now, one final thing I wanted to tell you about was the ability to inspect variable values. So if we do this interaction just yet one more time, you notice over here, there's local variables, closure variables, and global variables that you can inspect. So there's not much here. Let's resume. Okay, over here you can see here, there's local variables. You can see the data is set, and it actually has an attribute image path, and this tells you the value of the image path. Now ship image is there as well. It's non-defined. Status is success. So you can see the local variables, closure variables, and global variables again. And we highly recommend you look at these variables to understand the context of what's going on if it's relevant. Now, sometimes you'll just have a bunch of irrelevant variables, but sometimes you'll have relevant variables that you could look at. And it's dependent on you to make that judgment call. Again, you see the local variables here. Now ship image is set to that HTML there. So you see the live value, and there you can hover over it to see the live value as well. Hovering over the variable, that is. Now let's press play. Okay, and there you go. Now, that's pretty much it. That's how you use Chrome Developer Tools, and we think that through this combination of using Chrome Developer Tools and writing notes and diagrams of your understanding as we showed you, you should be able to get a good architectural understanding of this example and of future examples as well. So good luck. Thank you.